So welcome back to my channel. This is Dom, and Warlords have kindly sent me the new epic Punic Wars Hail Caesar rulebook, and I thought I'd have a look at what appears to have changed, what sort of special rules there are within this, and also what this book looks like. So let's take a look. So yes, Warlords sent me the new epic Hail Caesar rulebook, and it's a very nice book indeed, but I won't go into a huge amount of detail about the book itself. Other people will have done some interesting looks at that. I know Stuart from Miniature Realms did a really good flick through of this book. But basically what this is like a kind of cross between a scenario book and a campaign type book that Warlords might have done for other periods, but this is specifically looking at how does Hail Caesar as a rule set apply to the epic Punic period, well, to the Punic period, and any specific rules around the epic scale battles that these rules are designed for. So it's a nice book, really nice book, very high quality. It's got a lot of good images, lots of good examples of the rules, and most of these rules are exactly the same as you get in the standard book, but they've just used examples that reflect directly to the epic scale, so multi-basing, that kind of thing. It also takes you through some of the history, really good sections on the main three theatres of operations, the three Punic Wars themselves, and also lots of scenarios. There's a number of scenarios on here, which are really nice ones if you want to play historical games. The mixture of them, quite large, quite small, and some quite a lot that you played on a 6x4 table, which I know is a consideration for a lot of players, because they just don't have the table space to do the very big battles. So what I thought I'd do is just sort of delve into some of the things that that are specific to the epic rule set, because there are some interesting variations and some interesting rules. So you can see that the compositions are all in here, but let's just delve to unit size. So here we go. This is what they're recommending for epic battles, Punic Wars or Hail Caesar scale size. So a standard infantry unit is 3 bases. That's what they're saying. So to be a large is 4, and a small is 2, a tiny is 1. Warbands, however, are, as a standard, is 6 bases. And so forth. Cavalry standard base is 3. Standard unit is 3 bases. An elephant is 1, which actually I think has 2 elephants on it, from what I know. So you can see here you've got the different what they recommend as unit sizes, and also you can see the size of the bases themselves. So an infantry base is 60 by 20 mil for this scale. So if you wanted to use either 15 mil and you wanted to match what your friends are playing with, you can, build your bases up exactly the same. Now, I have to say it doesn't necessarily matter in any of the black powder systems, Hail Caesar, Pike and Shot, as long as they're reasonably similar. I mean, we've played multiple games where people have had different base sizes, and it doesn't necessarily matter terribly. But if you want to make sure you comply, then that's your rules, that's your scales. So you've got cavalry are 60 by 20. So 60 by 20 is the standard infantry base size. It's just different units are made up of different amounts. So in terms of the actual rule play, in keeping with Pike and Shot, which is the other epic set that I know best, I don't know so much about Waterloo because I haven't played that in the epic scale yet, but they've kept the 28 mil movement distances. So an infantry move is 6 inches in epic, and it's 9 inches for cavalry and 12 for light cavalry in open order. And of course, because you have a multiple chance of doing multiple moves, you could end up doing 18 inches if you got 3 moves off. So, you know, that's quite considerable. Things move across the table pretty rapidly. Likewise, missile ranges are exactly the same as in the 28mm book. So javelin 6, slings 12, bows 18 inches, light artillery 24, medium artillery 36, and heavy artillery 48, which again can feel slightly odd when you're playing with such small figures, but generally, in my experience with pike and shot at least, by the time everything gets, after the first sort of shooting phase where everything seems to fire at ridiculous ranges, generally you come down to firing at pretty much close range, and it doesn't feel any different. It really doesn't feel any different, but that can be, if you're used to 28mm, that can take a little bit of getting used to. So most of the other stuff in here is pretty much the same, but there are some really interesting variations, so we'll move on to those next. So one of the, I probably have missed a few changes in here, but the ones that have stood out to me, in the commanders section, so this is for your Army CNC. So you've got the normal general reroll ability, which you'd expect if you played Hail Caesar for any length of time. But there's a couple of extra special rules here. So you have the option to do Follow Me, which I think is a rule that applies in some of the other systems, where if a commander's within 12 inches of a unit in its own division, he can join it with a successful command roll and gets 3 moves, basically to bring them charging forward into combat or into plugging a gap or what have you. Rally, which is a standard thing, you can move your commander to a unit and rally off a wound or a morale token to recover some casualties up to them, as long as it's not down to below the first casualty you take. There's also General Advance, which is an order that can be given by your Army General. So it must be the first and only order given by commanders that term. Basically, it issues a general advance order to everybody on the battlefield. So it's basically advance to combat. So the order test is taken regardless of any penalties for from distance to the unit, and everything relies on it. But they only do 1 move. If the test is failed, the general can re-roll that test using his standard re-roll. So that's kind of interesting. If you blunder, you roll on the blunder test, and everything in the army responds to it. So it could be your entire army walks off the table if you're unlucky. Another one which I think is interesting is Where is Your Courage? It's a special order that can only be given by the Army General, so the CNC. It's similar to a Follow Me and Rally order, except it allows a unit from a broken division to recover its status and join the General's own division. So imagine you're playing a game and the right wing, Roman right wing, has been shattered, and the Roman cavalry are in full retreat because their commander's broken and they're going to have to retreat off the table. You could, if your CNC is close enough and he's in the central division, he could say, recover, where's your coverage, where's your courage, and if the general's within 12 inches of any unit from that broken division, he can basically challenge them, and if successful, they'll join his command from there on in. Now, what's really interesting, so he will, if successful, so you do a command roll. If successful, the unit joins that general's command immediately. If it's if the general's own command is broken, then that unit becomes part of a new division commanded by the general, which is interesting. If already disordered, the restored unit immediately recovers from disorder and that marker is removed. And if it's suffered 2 more casualties, 1 casualty is always removed in the same way as a rally. So it's quite a powerful thing, quite a powerful thing indeed. I quite like it because both those orders about moving forward with the army and also recovering a unit is kind of in keeping with the period where daring do's were done by the chief, the generals. So you've got in here all the special rules that apply to this period, which again I like because it's been brought together in one rule book, which is very helpful indeed. You see the rules for elephants and elites, and none of these appear to be substantially different. If I'm wrong, and when people have got the rules, please point it out in the comments down below, because as I say, this is my immediate look at the rules and what I have seen so far, and I may well have missed some bits, but look at these illustrations, fantastic. Who can't be excited about them? So here we go. Table sizes. It says many players will be playing one-on-one games on club-sized tables that are either 6x4 or 8x4. This presents no problem in terms of move distance or weapon ranges. Hail Caesar epic rules are designed to accommodate 4 foot across tables. So as long as it's about 4 foot across, you're pretty well cushy. So what I want to do now is look at the special rules and the characteristics of the different armies involved in this book. So obviously you've got the Romans, whose core army is the Legion, which has the Hastati, the Principals, and the Triarii. Now, one of the things I find slightly odd in these rules is that traditionally the Principals and the Hastati were roughly the same size in terms of unit, and the Triarii were roughly half that size. But in this book, all are fielded as 2 base units, so small units, and you have to take the same number of each. So you have to be, here we go. So you have to take an equal number of Hastati, Principal, and Triarii. Now, in theory, and well, not in theory, in how they were actually fielded, the Romans tended to have 2, 2, and 1 in terms of numbers of units, but for simplicity's sake, they've done it equal numbers, which, yeah, I can handle. Also, up to 50% of your army must be manipular units, so basically Romans or allied legions. That has to be half of the army. Roman army was predominantly an infantry army, and that was one of the problems that they had in the peninsula, in the Punic War, was dealing with the amount of efficient cavalry that the Carthaginians had in their armies. So what is the manipular rule? Well, that is basically to simulate the maniples of the Roman army. Now, one of the things that the Roman Legion was famous for was its flexibility and its ability to sport itself in combat. And I quite like the rules they've put in place for this. So any unit that has the manipular special rule allows 2 special abilities. A unit of Hastati can be supported by a unit of Principal or Triarii positioned diagonally behind it. So normally you have to be beside or behind to get support, but for this rule you can be diagonally across from it. Units of Principals can be supported by units of Hastati or Triarii positioned diagonally behind them. So there you go. So Hastati can be supported by Principals or Triarii, and Principals by Hastati or Triarii. So they all mutually supportive. Although notice the Triarii, the last line of defence, can't be supported in this way by the other 2. That's an interesting variation. Units can benefit from both manipular supports and regular supports, but cannot be supported by more than 3 units in a single combat phase. So that's important too. So basically you've got an image here showing you that this unit here, it's Principals supporting the Hastati. Because it's diagonally, it can support, and it basically encourages you to field them in the sort of checkerboard formation which you read about in history quite a lot. Now, if they're not diagonally across, this Principia can't support this unit in the same way, not as a manipular support. Now, the other interesting rule is a unit with manipular rule positioned diagonally behind another unit with a manipular rule. So in this case, this Principal can swap places with that unit in the second round. So you fought the first round, the unit has been tired up, taken a few casualties, may even be disordered as a result of the combat, and in the next round this unit can then swap in and replace that unit. In doing so, it's counted as charging, which is very powerful, although the unit that pulled out can't support it anymore. So that's the negative. So basically this unit swaps in for this one, providing fresh bodies, fresh impetus to the charge. Now that's pretty powerful, really, really interesting. And I like that rule. I think that's really interesting. Take a quick look at some of the commanders of legend that the Romans have. So you've got Pelubius, Corellius, Scipio Africus, so basically the legendary Scipio commander. He has a leadership rating of 10. He costs you 75 points though, but he's an inspired orator. So units in his division increase their stamina value by 1, which is hugely powerful. So Scipio the Elder, he was Scipio the Younger's father. His leadership is 8. He costs only 15 points, but he gives you strategic competence. So after both sides have set up, but before the battle begins, Scipio may redeploy 3 units in his army into a position where they would not be legally deployed. So you could basically put them into some advanced features on the train or something like that, just to grab initiative, which is an interesting one. You've got Claudius Nero here, who is a leadership 9, costs you 40 points. And he has a quick march special rule when giving orders involving advancing towards the enemy, but not charging or moving laterally across the battlefield. So basically moving directly at the enemy. Units in Nero's division may make 1 more move than the order test would allow, up to a maximum of 3, and providing that the order test wasn't blundered. So you rolled an order and you only got 1. Well, with this rule, you'd be able to do 2, as long as you're moving directly at the enemy. Then you've got Tiberius. He is a leadership 9, cost you 50 points, consumed with ambition. He was over eager to force a decisive battle on the invading Carthaginians, which led him to being ambushed at Tribia. All medium and heavy infantry in the army commanded by him have an eager special rule. Then you Gaius Valerio, son of a butcher, self-made man and champion of political underdog. Love it. He has a leadership of 8, costs you 40 points, and he has a plebeian council special rule. When he joined the army as a general, Vario was accompanied by an escort drawn from plebeian supporters. Levy says they were more remarkable for numbers than their dignity. If Vario is in your army, add 1 unit of Hastati and 1 unit of to Principals to his own division for free. However, these 2 units do not have the drilled special rule and count as freshly raised. So, interesting, gives you a free unit, right? So here you go, here's the Roman army. You've got the composition they need to be, so it needs to be, each division needs to have 4+ units in it. Excluding skirmishers, you've got to have, the army's got to be 75% infantry, which doesn't again include skirmishers. 50% needs to be manipular, so legionary type units, equal numbers of triarii, hastati and principals. The allied Latin manipular units can't be fielded in the same division, so they have to form their own division. There's an opportunity to have a division which has penal legion units within it. Now, they are historically, because as Carthage was rampaging around Italy, manpower was getting a bit tight, so they threw open the prisons, as sometimes happens, and basically forced a number of troops, a number of formations out there who were penal units. In lieu of time off for good behaviour, they could go and get killed by a Gallic warrior. Lucky them. Allied, you can choose units from the Allied unit for this. You can have up to 25% cavalry. At least 25% of the cavalry in your army must be lights. A division can contain up to half as many skirmishers, vela units, as they have as non-skirmishers, so it limits that. And there's other limits on skirmishers we won't go into. And then ballista. You can field... normally you can only field ballistas, but if players agree, you can have, and they're at least 3 hastati unit, you can have a heavy ballista catapult. There's the different troop types. You've got the hastati principals there. You've got, which are all fielded as small units and have the ability to be upgraded to tough fighters or stubborn. Then you've got, what's the difference between these? These are with pilums, these are with long spears. Early on in the period, they were spearmen. Later on, they were pilum. Pilums give you the enemy a -1 on their stamina save in the first round of combat against troops with pilums to simulate them being chucked in at last minute. There's various upgrades you can take: tough fighter, stubborn. But they come as drilled with the manipulator options. Then you've got the Triari, who are valiant and elite, and also stubborn, as befits their feature. Then you've got the features. Then you've got the allied troops, which also mirror. So they have allied hastati, principal, and Triari in the same way. They even have penal troops as well. Then you've got the Velites, which are the legionary skirmishers. Again, only small units and javelin armed, but they can be tough fighter, which could be interesting to take on the Carthaginian lights. And then you've got medium cavalry, Roman or allied. And then Italian light cavalry javelins, which can be upgraded to Tarentine, which were a particularly powerful unit of light cavalry who are elite and stubborn. And there's your ballista. So there you go, that's the Romans. So we'll move over to the Carthaginians, and one special rule the entire army has is the Carthaginian motivated mercenary rule. Now, one of the things about the Carthaginian army is they relied very heavily on mercenaries, and they're not like mercenaries that we have in mind when you think normally about mercenaries that are out for all they can get and only do a job if they're paid properly. Now, to be truthful, they're the same with the Carthaginians, but they were also a bit more sort of enamoured with their cause, and to simulate that, units with that rule get a +1 to their clash value when they fight Romans in their first combat of the game, which is pretty good. So if their clash of 9 goes to 10, very good, very useful indeed. So we'll look at Carthaginian legendary commanders. You've got Hannibal himself, leadership 10, points value of 80. He has a special rule called Master of Ambush. Before the armies are deployed, the Carthaginian player selects one division in his army other than the one commanded by Hannibal. It's not deployed in the battlefield. Instead, the Carthaginian player secretly notes down a terrain feature. Notes down one terrain feature not in either player's deployment zone, and at the start of any turn after the second, this division may enter the battlefield and be placed adjacent to that terrain feature. Units in the division may not make more than a single move in the turn they enter the battlefield and can't enter hand-to-hand unless they charged. So that's basically to simulate he quite regularly, usually with the help of his brother Mago, had cavalry in ambush positions, and quite frequently in the battles unlocked the Roman position by use of ambushes. So that's a nice little rule. Also, martial esteem. Any Gallic and Spanish units in Hannibal's army increase their stamina by 1. Now that's huge. So 3s become 4s, which is pretty chunky in a battle. Then you got Barca, Hasdrubal, who was another one of the Roman commanders, the Carthaginian commanders. He died early on. His leadership is 9, points value of 30, warrior to the end. When joining combat, Hasdrubal has 4 attacks, so pretty pokey in his own right, but more likely to get killed in combat, given the role you have to take if you have a general in combat. It reflects how many dice you've put in. So if you put in 1 dice, it's just a 12. If you put in 2 dice, it's 11 or 12. And in this case, if he puts in 4, it's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's a chance he may get killed. So that's, yeah, it's all or nothing really. Mago Barca, who was Hannibal's middle brother, he was a notable mounted commander. He has a leadership of 9. He has a points value of 35, and he is the pachyderm master. So elephants in Mago's army gain the drilled special rule. That's fearsome. So you can have drilled elephants wandering around. Hasdrubal Gisco, I'm butchering names, I'm sorry. He was either one of the best or one of the worst generals of the war. So there you go. Take me light. He has a leadership of 9 and a points value of 45, and he has a special rule that when deploying his army, he can add 1 additional unit of citizen levies to his own division for no additional cost. Now, citizen levy are not the most effective troops in the world, but it gives you another unit for free. And then Hanno, son of Bomilcar, he has a leadership rating of 8, costs you 15 points, and he's master of cavalry. His leadership counts as 9 when issuing orders to cavalry units, and all cavalry in his division can have the marauder special rule. Now you combine that with, say, Numidian cavalry or something, and that can be pretty pokey indeed. They'll move all the time pretty much, and also can operate pretty much wherever they like outside of command radius, which is very powerful indeed. So we'll look at their their army composition. So again, 4+ units, which don't include lights. 66% have to be infantry. Again, not counting skirmishers within that. Libyan heavy infantry, they have to be up to 25% of the army. Citizen levies, you can have up to 25% of those. Allied troops, you can choose from the Allied lists. They can have skirmishers can form up to half of any division. Cavalry, 25% of the army can be cavalry, of which half must be light cavalry, and you can have up to 1 in 8 units, which can be elephants in the army. The troop types, you've got the Libyans. I've talked about those in a separate video, or will do by the time this video goes up. They can be upgraded to elite, phalanx and tough fighters. The citizens, now they were generally, most of the citizenry of Carthage didn't fight. It's sort of until the very last war against Rome, because they were scraping the barrel by then. Most of the citizens provided the officers and were in the maritime units, or just basically financed the armies that were mercenary in nature. So they were unusually in the field, only in dire emergencies, and they get the levy special rule to reflect that. You've got the Libby Phoenician medium cavalry unit, which again are fielded as small. There's a theme in this that most of the units seem to be small. But you can upgrade one of those to a guard unit, which gives the elite category, and then your elephants, which are 23 points a pop. Rather nice indeed. Then you've also got a separate section on allied troops. Now this is for both lists, so both sides took advantage of large numbers of allies, which is nice, and you can, I guess you could potentially field just an allied army, which I think would be kind of interesting. So allied special rule is an interesting one. So where they have a designation that they're an amalgamate soldiers, they are basically composed of a variety of troops drawn from a number of the city-states in the Italian peninsula. So you can give them a special rule that they want. So they could be brave, eager, have feigned flight, freshly raised, or tough fighter, depending on how you want to play them. They also have the same motivated mercenary rule, so if they're on the Carthaginian side and they're fighting against the Romans, they get +1 to their clash value in the first round. And you can see, do they do an army composition? No, they don't. So it would be harder to do a standalone formation of mercenaries, but you could work it out. So you've got Italian allied medium infantry, again with various options to make them levy, motivated mercenaries, or elites. Spanish Scutari, medium infantry who have the pilum themselves, so the Carthaginians, if they field Scutari, which traditionally they fielded quite large numbers of Spanish Scutari, having the pilum gives them troops that are very similar in nature to the Romans themselves, which is quite good. Then they've got the Spanish light infantry, Libyan light infantry, again with javelins, Ligurian light infantry with javelins, and then Gallic or Celtiberian warband troops. Now they have a wild fighter special rule. Now remembering they have to be quite large bases, so 6 bases for a standard unit, 8 if you field it as a large. But look at that, 6 bases with 9 attacks, and with wild fighter they get to re-roll any misses in the first round, which is pretty powerful, but only for 1 combat. Then you've got all the skirmish types, which include Numidians, Cretan archers, which Cretan archers can only be fielded by Rome, which are bow armed, very effective. They can have the marksman special rule. They don't seem to have Balearic slingers, which is interesting. I'm surprised by that, because that was a feature of the Carthaginian army, unless they're in their Carthaginian book. No, interesting. So they don't have Balearic slingers, which I'm very surprised about. Then you've got allied cavalry, you've got Gallic or Spanish, here we go, which can be upgraded to tough fighter, 1 unit can be. Allied light javelin cavalry, which can have the feigned flight if they're Numidian. What else we got here? I think that's it. So there you go, that's the allied forces, which is interesting. And you've got some sample armies here, so if you don't want to build your own armies, you can follow the suggested forces here, which all have points values, and also give you where they've upgraded things, which is nice. So if you wanted to play a 600 point pickup game, there's your forces already done, which is a nice touch actually. I think that's a really nice touch. There's the history sections, which I will enjoy reading through, even though I've read quite a lot about the Punic War. And then some of the scenarios here at the back. So really interesting book, and I'm looking forward very much to playing the game. I've worked my way through a couple of units already, so Numidians and the Libyan spearmen on the Carthaginian side, and eventually I'll start on the Romans as well. And looking forward to playing some games of this, because I do like Hail Caesar system. I think it works really nicely, but it should be great fun to do, and I do like Ancients as well. So thanks to Warlords for sending me this. Let me know in the comments whether you're excited about Epic Hail Caesar, or whether it's just nothing to you. Any of those rules specifically that sort of grab you and think, yeah, that's good. I have to say I like the manipulative rule. I think that's really, really good. I think there was another rule system years ago that had a similar kind of system where you could swap in units if you were a certain distance from the frontline troops fighting. I can't remember what that was. Somebody might be able to remind me in the comment section. Those Grosnards like me have been around for a while. But I think that's a really clever way of simulating the Manipul system and encouraging you to field them in that sort of checkerboard formation, which historically the Romans were renowned for. Also quite like the motivated mercenary rule, and you know, I think it's going to be an interesting game. This book is great. It's a chunky old book, 200 odd pages, I think, something in that, 256, 57 pages, something like that. Lovely illustrations which will inspire you. Quick reference sheet at the back, although for us old Grosnards, that's a bit of a small typeface to read, but we'll work through it. But yeah, really pleased with this. So thank you to Warlords, as I say, very much appreciated them sending me this. Follow the channel if you're interested in more Hail Caesar content. I am certainly aiming to get some battles underway. Looking forward to having a go of the game as soon as I've managed to paint up some figures. I know there'll be interest down the club to play this, so make sure you hit that subscribe button to follow my journey. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate all the views and all the comments and all the subscriptions, and thanks very much to my channel members and Patreons for all the support you give me. Much appreciated. Stay safe, stay well, and I will see you again soon. This is Dom, signing out.